I'm Michael Whiteford, the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at Iowa State University. As you know, ISU has a proud history that dates back to 1869 when it first opened its doors to men and women. It was a coeducational college from the very beginning. In 1870, ISU President Welch directed students to work on campus. Although the male and female students at the time worked in different areas, President Welch ordered that the men and women were to be paid equal wages. Yes. However, as we know from Lilly Ledbetter's experience, equal pay is still an issue in many parts of our country. Tonight's event is sponsored by a number of entities, and I welcome you tonight on behalf of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, the Carrie Chapman Catt Center for Women in Politics, the Women's Studies Program, the Margaret Sloss Women's Center, the University Committee on Women, and the Departments of Economics and Political Science, the YWCA of Ames, and the ISU Committee on Lectures. Right now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Diane Patton, State President of the American Association of University Women of Iowa, another co-sponsor of this event. Diane and the AAUW have advocated for the successful enactment of a state version of the Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, the first bill President Barack Obama signed in office. Diane is a member of the Calhoun County branch of the AAUW. She is coordinator of Leadership Fort Dodge, a program of the Fort Dodge Area Chamber of Commerce. Diane is also a graduate of Iowa State University and received the Helen LeBaron Hilton Recognition Alumni Award for her outstanding community leadership. It's my pleasure right now to introduce you to Diane Patton.
Thank you, Dean Whiteford, for your ISU welcome, and particularly for your supportive partnership with AAUW Iowa in bringing Lilly Ledbetter for her appearance here in the state. AAUW's mission is to advance equity for women and girls through education, research, and advocacy. That compels us to stand with women like Lilly, who are seeking equity, and to network with others, such as the Iowa Commission on the Status of Women, who, by the way, I will let you know there's a flyer out on the table out here that you can pick up about, where they're bringing a network of women's organizations and organizations that work with girls next week here in Des Moines. And that will offer an opportunity for us to network and better understand each other's work and to be able to continue work together. In addition, we work with and encourage and embolden young women like Maggie Luttrell, an Iowa State grad and a graduate student here. While she was an undergrad, she was the first female student elected to be the liaison to the Ames City Council representing the student body. She was the student body vice president in the academic year of 2008. And Maggie has attended AAUW's National Conference for College Women Student Leaders. And when she found out about grants that AAUW provide, she snagged one of those and brought Campaign College to Iowa State. And this is a program to encourage and educate women about how to become involved with elections and government student body. So with that, I'll welcome Maggie Luttrell.
Hello. Lilly Ledbetter is a name that has become synonymous with equal pay for women. She is one of the best-known activists for equal pay for women and the impacts of gender discrimination in the workplace. Ledbetter began working at Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company at a plant in Alabama in 1979. It was following her early retirement that she realized that she hadn't been monetarily compensated in the same way that her male counterparts were. She was making between $500 and $1,500 less than her male colleagues, who started at the same time she had. It was then that she decided to take action and sue Goodyear for discrimination. While she initially won her discrimination suit against Goodyear, the United States Court of Appeal later reversed the lower court's decision, stating that Ledbetter could only sue for allegations regarding pay decisions that occurred less than 180 days before her beginning the EEOC process. In 2007, several Democratic members of Congress introduced the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, which revised the law to state that if a present act of discrimination pertains prior acts outside of the 180-day statute of limitations for pay, discrimination can be incorporated into the claim. On January 29, 2009, President Barack Obama signed his first piece of legislation into law, the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. The Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act restores a long-standing interpretation of civil rights law and EEOC policies that allow employees to challenge any discriminatory paycheck they receive. This bill is in a direct response to the U.S. Supreme Court's problematic May 2007 decision in Ledbetter versus Goodyear Tire and Rubber. The passed act helps not only women, but all workers who are victims of wage discrimination on the basis of sex, race, color, religion, national origin, age, or disability. The Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act amends the Civil Rights Act of 1964, stating that the 180-day statute of limitations for filing an equal pay lawsuit regarding pay discrimination resets with each new discriminatory paycheck. Ledbetter has become an icon for young women such as myself in doing what is inherently right and equal, no matter how long it takes. She has proved that you do not have to be born an activist, but that sometimes, when the time and place is right, you must take a stand. It is my honor and privilege to welcome Lilly Ledbetter to the stage.
Thank you. Thank each one of you for being here. It is indeed my honor and privilege to be in Iowa and to be here at this university and be on this campus and with AAUW, my friends, again. I don't do jokes. When I started my speaking around the country and standing up, I said to my oldest grandson, I said, I don't tell jokes. And every speaker I've ever heard always tells jokes. He said, Grandma, all you've got to do, especially in those northern states, is just start speaking, and you'll be funny. So, according to the New York Times, if you can get past the southern drawl, I do have a good story that I would like to share. And Dean, I'll try not to break the mic in here this time, which we learned the problem was the low battery. So I didn't break it, but anyway, I wanted to share a story with you about AAUW and myself because I'm so grateful to all of the staff and the people with AAUW across the country. You've been my friends, and I appreciate that. And I love universities, Dean, because I had a job in assistant to the financial aid director at Jacksonville State University for a while, and I believe that that job kept me very young. I hated to move on to another one, but the grass looked greener and the pay was better, so I left. But I love universities and the work and the students. So I'm indeed grateful to be here on that account. But working on the bill, the second go-around, when the bill passed in the Senate, I went from the Senate building to the train station and was waiting for a train to go to New Jersey to speak to a group of New Jersey AAUW and a college combined. That seems to work a lot of places. So the two had gone together and brought me in. Senator Ted Kennedy called me while I was sitting in the train station, and it was elbow to elbow, and every seat was filled, and I'm, yes, Senator Kennedy, and I'm responding to his call, and everybody is looking, and it got really hush-hush and very quiet, and so when I hang up, I said, yep, that was Senator Ted Kennedy, because he called to congratulate me on getting the bill passed, and he said, when I get back to the office, we'll talk more. But I knew that he'd probably not be back, and he did too, but It was so special that he called. But I got to New Jersey. The ladies picked me up and put me in a hotel. And they said, when you go down to breakfast, you just sign the ticket. We're picking up all your expenses. So the next morning, I picked up the Wall Street Journal off to the rack, and there was not much going on there, just me and a few other folks. And I go into breakfast, and I place my order, and when the waitress gets back, I'm over to the third page, and the bottom of the third page was a complete article about the Ledbetter bill, the discrimination pro-shift in Washington labor, the bill passing, and my photo. I know you can't see it from here, but it was a nice article and a pretty good photo. And the waitress recognized me. She started looking. I said, yep, that's me. And she said, well, why are you in the paper? And, of course, I have to tell her. I tell her the whole story about the pay discrimination and why I couldn't let it go. And so she and the other waitress get them a paper, and they read it. And then I wait, and I never get my ticket. And I called her over, and I said, look, I've got to sign this ticket. I've got to go. These ladies are picking me up. She said, don't worry about it. Your breakfast is paid for. I said, well, I know, but I need to sign. She said, no. She said that it's paid for, and pointed at herself and the other waitress. I said, look, these AUW women, they've got a lot of money. Let them pay for it. I said, you're working girls, and there wasn't anything going on. And Lisa, I have to tell you, I don't know what the etiquette is even today when somebody else pays for your breakfast on giving tips, because I would have given them some AUW money on that ticket if I'd have been tipping, but they didn't get any. The next day I get off the elevator, and the housekeeping people are lined up. And they all chipped in that day, so I didn't buy my breakfast again. And I kept saying, these AUW women, they've got a lot of money. Let them pay it. Some groups don't appreciate me saying that, but, you know, I felt like those ladies needed their money worse than AUW did right at that time looking at them. And they were older women, and you know what they shared? They said, we have a daughter and we have a granddaughter who's coming along, and this will make a difference for them. It's too late for us, and we know that. But what you have done, it will make a difference in our families down the road. And people ask me today, especially reporters, do you not understand defeat? Do you not understand when you lose and understand to take it and graciously stay home? That's not who I am. That's not who Lily Ledbetter is. And the stories I've heard across this country in this nation, I can't let it go. I couldn't let it go for my own dignity and my own self. I can't let it go today because there's still much, much work to be done. But the timeline in my life, I started with my case in early 1998, filing a charge with the Equal Employment Commission in Birmingham. The lady who interviewed me was so thorough and did not shortened my time. She was with me over 3 hours, and she filled out the paperwork, and when she finished, she said, Miss Lily, do you realize this company is messing with you for 20 years? I said, yes, I do now, but I didn't then. And in 1999, Equal Employment called and said, you've got one of the best cases we've ever seen. You may want to think about getting your own attorney and go forward. And that's what I did. I had to find an attorney that could go up against a major corporation because they have deep pockets and a lot of money. And I didn't. I was one of those people who, me and my family, lived paycheck to paycheck. I found a law firm in Birmingham, Alabama, and I researched and found the lawyer in the firm that didn't lose any cases, and he was best known for settling, never getting to court. But we finally got to court, trial, and Diane, I didn't know you lived in Calhoun County. That's where my trial was Calhoun County, Alabama, because you have to have a federal trial in your home county where you live. My trial occurred finally in January of 2003 in Calhoun County, my home county. The jurors are called in from various counties surrounding. The trial lasted a week, and after the testimony of all the people at the court, the verdict came back, which I'll go over later, $3.8 million. Of course, I didn't get it. We went to the Supreme Court after the appeal was denied in the 11th Circuit for me. It approved Goodyear's appeal. But we went to the Supreme Court in November of 2006 and had to wait until 2007 on the verdict. It took 9 years. And you don't just sit and do nothing during that time. You have to work on your case. You make a lot of calls. You contact a lot of people. You look for records. You dig in old boxes, hunting records, and you go through trying to put your case together because you do have to have proof. But due to the going back to visit with the equal employment people in Birmingham and Washington, I've done a training video for those people because my attorneys told them that had that interviewer had not been so thorough, we would not have had the case we did. And that means a lot to individuals because when you've been degraded like I had been and you get there, you feel like you have no self-worth. You have no dignity left. In fact, I told the lady that I was dragging my ego in the door behind me because I had lost my self-respect due to that degrading education I had and how Goodyear had felt about me. But prior to going to Goodyear, I was a district manager for H&R Block at that time, managing 16 locations. So I didn't fall off the truck out in front of the plant, and I wasn't a token hire. I had a good track record. But my life has changed so drastically after all of this that has happened. First, the media started calling, and the attorneys said on May 29th, Lily, you don't have to talk to them if you don't want to. We'll handle the calls. Just refer them to us. But I decided that I had give this case my best, and I had fought hard, and it had been a long journey. I had nothing to be embarrassed. I felt like at that time that Supreme Court, 5 justices should have been more embarrassed than myself. So when NBC called, I said, sure. Where do you live? I tell them, and they come on up. So we do an interview for Brian Williams' program that night. They do all these hookups. These 2 guys come in and set up. When we finished the interview, they said, we would like for you to go in the kitchen and just act like you're making a cake. You really don't have to, but we'd like for you to sort of go through the motions. And I said, look, I've just lost $3.8 million and you want me to bake a cake? I don't think so. So we didn't make a cake, but we poured out the pot of coffee that my husband had made, and I made another pot of coffee. The next day, CNN came, and it was the same 2 guys. They're freelance people, so the media kept hiring the same people. And the guy said, well, we know you don't do cakes, or maybe would you do one today? I said, nope, I'm still not doing a cake. He said, well, we can't do coffee. We did that yesterday for NBC. He said, do you got a teapot? So we boiled some water, and I made a cup of tea. He said, we'd like for you to go to the mailbox and get the mail. I said, it sure will be a long walk because I've got a post office box. He said, well, I see a paper box out front. Get your husband to put the papers back in, and you walk out and get them. So we do that. I don't know. I haven't figured that one out yet, either one of those. But what was really neat, Norman Lear calls, and for your older people, you know who he is. He's Jefferson's and All in the Family, and he's wanting to make a lot of videos to put on YouTube because he has 5 daughters. He said, I'm not going to live forever, and these girls have to have a job that will pay them equally and fairly. So he sent these 2 same freelance people back to my house. Same 2 people. We got to know each other real well. They knew exactly what pictures to take off the wall and how to rearrange the house. But he sent 2 people in from Washington, and we made a video, or made lots of videos all day. And I waited for my movie contract, and I never got one. So, but I think the videos, one of them is still running. So they turned out real well. But It's been a long journey for me with this case, and I've had a lot of fun, a lot of good experiences, but I'm still broke. But the thing about it, last year at this time, Rome, Italy called, the Italian ministries, and said, we'd like for you to come to Rome to just tell your story. So my Washington attorney and I traveled to Rome, Italy to share my story. I brought home a beautiful statue that's quite valuable, which someday may be in some museum, I hope in Washington, but it's a beautiful statue, and it represents women's struggles because they're not doing any better than we are in the United States. I've been interviewed by Chile and the French, and recently I was in Vermont for Senator Patrick Leahy. A Japanese reporter flew into Boston and drove down with a photographer. She sat through the college presentation and then interviewed me for another 2 hours. She sent me the newspaper article from Japan. All I recognize is my photo, President Obama, and Justice Ginsburg. But this has been a real life-changing experience. And in August of 2008, I got invited to go to the Democratic Convention and speak. The lady at the National Women Law Center, she said, we've negotiated, you can go and not endorse Obama. Said, we feel like that you should not step out because you see this, what we work on and what most of what AAUW works on has nothing to do with either party. It's bipartisan problems. It's a family problem. It's civil rights. It matters, and it's neither party. Everybody should be on board. So we went to Denver. Lisa was there. We all hung out together. That was quite an experience. I had prime time on Tuesday evening right before Hillary Clinton and Senator Warner. Senator Warner's speech was about as long as mine, about 4.5 minutes, and we were ahead of Senator Clinton. They called me from Washington, too, and said, and you can't wear black, Lily, which I always liked to wear black, but I couldn't wear black, so I had to get a color. But that was quite an experience to walk out there and tell my story, and I could see the eyes and the faces of the women down front. I could see the tears running down their faces. When I walked off that stage and the first reporter stuck a mic up and said, when did you endorse Obama? I said, right now, because I knew it was time to step out, because my goal at that point in my time was that I wanted that bill to pass, and it needed to pass, and that was who I was supporting anyway. So I stepped out. Marsha Greenberger from the Law Center called me the next morning. She said, Lily, I believe the media's putting it out that you've endorsed Obama. I said, yep, I believe I did. So we made a commercial, and then later the commercial that I'm so proud of is the one when I responded to John McCain, having said that women's problem, we only needed more education and more training. So they're still running on the website, too, if you'd like to look it up. I'm still very proud of that one. But then I had the opportunity to campaign for the new president and then to follow on to the White House with everyone to get the bill signed. But losing my husband in December of 2008 then, the first day after the funeral, which was December the 16th, would have been our 53rd wedding anniversary. The first call I got that day was Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton. The second call was President-elect Obama. The next day, they called and said, what would be a good time for Mrs. Obama to call? I said, any time she would like. But I can imagine how much those people had going on in their lives, but they took the time to call and to see how I was doing. And to walk up to the White House the morning that we went for the bill signing, and there's a lot of you in this audience that was there. It was cold. Walk up to that gate, and my son-in-law was with me, and my daughter. And my grandson's eyes were as big as saucers because people were screaming and chanting my name and hollering and waving. And they thought I had become a rock star all of a sudden. But it was quite an experience. And as Lisa said, she was on the front row. And all of these women's organizations, AAUW and all of the others, that's the first time they'd been there in 8 years. It's quite an experience. But I have to thank the AAUW and Lisa, because you were there with me every step of the way. You made phone calls, you emailed, you did everything possible to get the support to get this bill passed across the nation. And that's what it takes. And it's wonderful to be here tonight and talk to this group, because I know by you being here, you feel the same way I do. It's time to upgrade our family life in this country, and that's what the president talked about when he signed the bill. Equality is a wonderful idea. It really sounds good, and it's a great idea, but we still have a lot of work and a lot of things to do before we arrive. And my story shows that. We still have a long way to go for women to be truly equal. I had no idea how far behind we were until I got into this. And we do have our work cut out for us, but I know together we will be successful and our goal will be met, and we will make that change. I did not start out to be a spokesperson for equal rights. In fact, the plan I had sketched out for my life was a simple one. I would work hard, I would raise a family, and play by the rules. I would save and build a nest egg, and when retirement came, I'd be able to simply settle down and enjoy the fruits of my labors. That's the way it's supposed to work, isn't it? I wasn't seeking fame or looking to become a household name. I just wanted fairness and a change to make a good life for myself and my family. That's not a lot to ask, or so I thought. It should be pretty simple to hold up your end of the bargain, and your employers hold up theirs. Everybody wins, right? Well, my name is Lily Ledbetter, and I held up my end of the bargain, but my employer, on the other hand, did not. And tonight, I'm here to tell you a little bit about my story. The story begins in 1979 when Goodyear hired me to work as a supervisor in their tire plant in Gadsden, Alabama. I wound up working there for 19 years and 10 months. I was one of the few women to work there in a supervisory capacity. There were very few women in the factory in any capacity, much less in managerial jobs. It wasn't easy. In fact, the plant manager flat out said that women shouldn't be working in a tire factory because women just made trouble. But the thing of it is, I had no idea until I got that anonymous tip how much less I was being paid. Until that night, I worked night shift. It took about 30 years to rate day shift. And when I started at Goodyear, all the managers got the same pay, but then Goodyear went to a pay for performance. The problem was when they switched to pay for performance, they didn't do evaluations. They just gave out the money any way they saw fit. After that, people doing the same jobs could get paid differently, and Goodyear kept what everyone got paid a secret. In fact, I was told upon hiring in personnel, do not discuss your pay while you work here or you will not work here. And we weren't allowed to ask or talk about it at work at all. Some years I got raises, some years I didn't. Some of the raises seemed pretty good, but I didn't know if they were as good as the raises other people were getting. But I did a good job. In fact, in 1996, I got a top performance award. In the early 90s, they picked me to be one of the people to start up Light Truck Radio in Gadsden. There were only 4 of us. And I only started to get the hard evidence when that note was left for me one evening when I got to work and checked my mail. That note fell out showing my name and 3 males. We 4 had the same job. While my pay was ranging $3,727 per month, the lowest paid male was getting $4,286 per month for the same work. And to add insult to injury, he had a lot less experience than I did. In fact, he had just transferred in to the managerial side of it from quality control, a much lower paying job, already making $600 more per month than I was. And that not only hurt drastically me and my family, because we were paid overtime as first line managers. I thought about letting it go, but I just couldn't. It was a matter of basic fairness and of my dignity. So in 1998, I filed a charge with the Equal Employment in Birmingham, Alabama, and I was still working at that time. I worked 10 months later after that, but it was after the retirement when EEOC called, and I carried Goodyear to court in 2003. In court, Goodyear acknowledged it was paying me less, but they said that it was because I was a poor performer. That wasn't true, and thanks to some courageous women who testified on my behalf, the jury didn't bite, and they didn't believe it either. At the end of the trial, the jury found that Goodyear had discriminated against me and awarded me more than $3 million in damages. The lawyers had told me that when the jury came back and read the verdict, whatever it was, to make no facial expression, no outward motion. So we had 4 lawsuits. The one I lost that I wanted to win was the age discrimination. I lost that one. And then when they hit the equal pay, discrimination in pay, they said yes, $3.8 million. I had to sit on my hands to be able to contain myself. I was so thrilled. I had to look at the ceiling practically and not look at anyone. But the judge asked the foreman to take a seat. He explained to the courtroom how there was a $300,000 cap, and that was because I worked for a major corporation. Had I worked for a smaller employer, I could have only gotten $50,000. That's the cap that's put on these damages. And 2 years back pay is as far back as an individual can go. So they took that lowest paid male in the tire room and calculated each year for my back pay. So I left the courtroom on Friday afternoon with a verdict and an award of $360,000. But I love the media. The next day, the headlines read, Jacksonville, Alabama woman awarded $3.8 million. Oh, it went across, it ran on CNN, it ran on all of the national TV programs and in every major paper, because I have most of the copies at my house, people sending them. But it is really outstanding what that verdict did. There's a lot to be said for that. It was well worth it. But that was an unbelievable moment in my lifetime, and it was good. I felt vindicated, as if I had stood up for principle. But on May 29th, 2007, the Supreme Court reversed the judgment. They took every dollar of that award away. They even took the 2 years back pay. According to the court, I had filed my lawsuit too late, even though I continued to get lower pay than the men up to the day I retired from Goodyear. The court said that I should have complained the very first time I got a smaller paycheck than the men, even if I didn't know what they were getting paid, and even if I had no way to prove that decision was discrimination. The court ruled that once that 180 days has passed from the initial pay decision, a worker is stuck with unequal pay for equal work for the rest of her career. In other words, the court held that if you don't know about discrimination or can't figure things out right away, the company can treat you like a second-class citizen for the rest of your time you work there. And in my case, it goes on into retirement and for the rest of my life. This decision completely reversed precedent and set a new rule for pay discrimination claims, that meant that it wasn't just me who had to swallow the consequences of pay discrimination. It was every other working woman in America was forced into the same corner. Justice Ginsburg wrote an amazing dissent that hit the nail on the head. She said that the majority's rule just doesn't make sense in the real world. You can't expect people to go around asking their co-workers how much money they're making, especially when you work at a place like I did, where you're one of the only women in a male-dominated factory. You don't want to make waves unnecessarily. You want to try to fit in and get along. But the bottom line was that every paycheck I received, I got less than what I was entitled to under the law. That was wrong, not to mention illegal, but the Supreme Court disagreed. I won't lie to you, I was pretty devastated by the court's decision. In one fell swoop, I lost my case. I became the poster child for unequal pay for equal work. But instead of taking it quietly, I decided to fight back. I owed that much not just to myself, but to my daughter and my granddaughter, not to mention all of America's women and girls who deserve a fighting change. So began an 18-month journey to get Congress to pass a bill overturning the Supreme Court's decision, making clear that women can challenge every discriminatory paycheck they receive. It wasn't an easy fight, but I gave it my all. I gave speeches around the country, visited more members of Congress than I can count, and got involved in the presidential campaign, even making a commercial in support of then Senator Obama. But I also had lots of allies inside and outside of Congress. I was joined by tenacious advocates who lobbied Congress, sent letters and emails, made phone calls, held briefings and press conferences, and rallied millions of people across the country to the cause. And those millions of people played a crucial role, letting their members of Congress know how important it was to pass this law and make sure that women can effectively claim their right to equal pay. The House had to pass the bill twice before we could get the Senate, where you need the 60 votes to get most things done, rather than a simple majority of 51 to agree to make it law. But it eventually happened, and on January 29th, 2009, I was there at the White House next to President Obama as he signed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, and it became the first bill he signed into law. That law doesn't affect me. I will never get back the hundreds of thousands of dollars that Goodyear refused to pay me. But it makes sure that what happened to me can never happen to another woman, and that every woman can go to court to challenge pay discrimination every time it occurs. It wasn't easy. It wasn't ever part of my grand plan to someday have my name be on a Supreme Court case or an act of Congress. I simply wanted to work hard and support my family. The rest, I believed, would take care of itself. Clearly, fate had other plans for this Alabama girl. Now I've been a litigant, an advocate, a lobbyist, an author, and a public speaker. Sometimes life throws us curveballs. We may not have expected them, but we still have to deal with them. Finally, the Senate is now considering the paycheck fairness. It's already passed the House. In fact, Lisa says it passed more than the Ledbetter bill, and that's understandable. It's a really important bill. That bill would update the laws requiring equal pay to make them better tools to combat pay discrimination. One of the most important provisions of the bill would prohibit retaliation against workers who ask about employers' wage practices or disclose their own wages to coworkers. This provision would have been particularly helpful to me because Goodyear prohibited me and my colleagues from sharing our wages. This policy delayed my discovery of the pay inequities between me and my male counterparts by literally decades. So what happens now? We've got to back and call our senators. Of course, you've got Senator Tom Harkin here in Iowa. We know he's on board. But if we can get this Paycheck Fairness Bill passed, I know that President Obama will sign it because he worked on it while he was still a senator himself. But we have to keep working because the rewards when you do work may be of no personal benefit to you. But it's possible in some cases that it would bring a promotion or raise that a person is entitled to keep working for these rewards of equality in the workforce. But even if it doesn't affect you directly, you'll know that you are helping to make things a little fairer and life a little better for the people who surround you. That's why I keep going, and it's incredibly gratifying to me to have the opportunity to make my small contribution. Because getting into this work, I've learned that not only across this country of ours and international, there are so many inequities in our treatment of our women and minorities. And by having those inequities, it affects our families and our states and our nation. So we've got to get back on track and to turn this around and get these laws updated. I thank you for your attention and your commitment and for having me and listening to my story. And I'll be around for a while if you'd like to ask any questions. I have no secrets. If you don't believe it, just check the internet. Just Google my name. You'll get all the information, probably more than you'd like. But it's been a pleasure for me to be in Iowa and to meet all the folks here. I wanted to come here for quite some time. Senator Harkin invited me 2 years ago, and then it didn't work out. But Diane, it worked out this time, so thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, AAUW.
All right, thank you so much. We do have time for a few questions. So if you do have a question, what we're going to have you do is raise your hand, and we will call on you. And either Ms. Ledbetter or I will repeat the question so everybody can hear it if we need to. So does anyone have any questions?
Are people with disabilities considered minorities in this bill, or are they not in it?
What she asked was, if with people with disabilities, are they considered minorities, or are they considered part of this act? Correct?
Are they least? Lawyer Lisa Lardy.
Essentially, my name is Lisa Matt from the American Association of Women. I'm their lobbyist.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
And essentially, the Americans with Disabilities Act covers wage discrimination for folks with disabilities. And Title VII also covers wage discrimination for all kinds of protected classes, although not people with disabilities. The Ledbetter Act was important in that it affected not just equal pay for women, but also what was going on in ADA, what was going on in Title VII, what was going on in the Rehab Act, and other civil rights laws. So that was critical in that it felt like it was just about women, but it actually was about pretty much every worker you can think of that's protected by these various civil rights laws. The Paycheck Fairness Act, which is the other law or bill she was talking about, is literally just a law about sex-based pay discrimination. So that's a different ball of wax.
Did you ever figure out, or
No, I don't know who sent it. In fact, it possibly, the union people there is under the Steelworkers Union. It could have been a union person, or it could have been someone higher up in management, because the salaried people, which that's what I was, our paychecks came out of Akron, and there was not any information locally except would have been in my immediate boss's files. And when we did get to trial, I will share this with you, the judge asked for my personnel record, and my boss said on the stand that they burned them because they were getting ready to shut the factory down, and Judge U.W. Clement said, let me explain the law to talking to the Goodyear attorneys, because once a charge is filed, even he said if they burned the plant, they'd still have to keep the file until that case was closed. But they could not produce at trial any personnel records on me. They didn't have them. The judge asked for them. They didn't have them. And also the lady, one of them who testified on my behalf, they asked her why she never complained. And she said, well, I was a divorced mother with a blind, handicapped son, and we lived paycheck to paycheck. And she sold 22 years service and left Goodyear and went to Honda as a supervisor. I will share this with you while we're waiting on another question. In bringing up the disabilities, one of the reasons that it was so critical that we get this reversed, that I believe by July of 2007, there had already been about 200 cases, maybe somewhere in that neighborhood, just thrown out by judges using the 180-day rule. Even a handicapped man, the best example I heard was the man who was trying to get into a non-accessible handicap apartment building, and the judge said, oh, you should have filed your charge 180 days before whenever the building was built. The guy wasn't even born. But the judges were cleaning up their calendars using that 180-day rule, and it just left too many options to hurt too many people, too many families. Yes, sir. Oh, okay. No, that was never brought up during the years because none of us knew that it was a problem because we didn't know. The other lawsuits I had, one was the major one I had, the two I wanted to win was pay discrimination and age, because they forced me out at age 60 and my income dropped from about 85%, 85 to 90, because I couldn't draw Social Security at the time. I only had the Goodyear retirement. The other two was that they call all retirees back to work, and they call it double dipping. You get your retirement, and they pay you your old salary on whatever work you're doing for them. And they called everybody back except Lily Ledbetter. So I sued them over that, and I officially went in to file an application with them during that. And But that was one of the suits, and then there was another one. I took a week off vacation to take my mother for cancer treatment because she had cancer at the time, and actually she died the first day I retired. But I was out a week, and I get back, and they tell me that I set a press up that had the wrong calculations, and me and the supervisor, who was African American, we got a 3-day layoff. So that was the other lawsuit. Yes.
I wondered if you know how the rest of our congressional legislators' position has been in the House or the Senate on the Fair Pay Act, or the paycheck.
Paycheck. Lisa does. Lisa Matz does. Lisa's my attorney. In fact, I thought she was an attorney for a long time. She knew she's such a good lobbyist and knew the law. So I said, "Gee, Lisa, where'd you get your law degree?" And she said, "I'm not a lawyer."
I just play one on TV. No,
Yeah.
All right, so
she's good.
In terms of where the Iowa delegation stands, we have some congressional voting records, actually, sir, if you would hold that up. and it lists specifically where all your House members voted. So I'm not going to get into that. In terms of because it's already passed the House and we're good there. In terms of your Senate delegation, Senator Harkin is a champion for the bill. As you know, he also has his own pay equity bill, which is kind of like the next step after we pass paycheck fairness. So he's a co-sponsor. He chaired a hearing about a month ago, and is committed to trying to move the bill this Congress. Senator Grassley is not yet a co-sponsor. He did not vote for the Ledbetter bill when it went through last year. So I'm not overly optimistic at this point in terms of trying to get him to co-sponsor. However, one of the things you always need to know about your senators, and as Lily mentioned, is that it's all about 60 in the Senate. So we might not be able to get him to vote yes for the bill, but we could get him to vote yes for cloture, which is that 60 vote threshold vote that they have, to allow the bill to continue in debate. So for those of you who are activists or like to be involved in this issue, calling Senator Grassley and asking him to vote yes to let the bill through, yes on cloture is the specific term, is a really good idea. The other thing I would say is that about the retaliation issue, it actually is completely legal to retaliate against some employees who share their salary. The National Labor Relations Act has some protections for hourly workers, but for managers, there is no such protection. So Goodyear was completely justified in saying that they would fire Lily if she talked about it. In fact, I would also say that's part of why she doesn't know who put that note in her box, because that person could also, at this moment, be fired if they found out that they were the ones who had left the note. Yeah.
I'd like to know, as you're going around and talking with the different groups and you see the diversity in the audience, women obviously are listening to your message. Are you starting to see more gentlemen in the audiences, and like the fathers and husbands are kind of getting the idea?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. That is outstanding, because this is what I've learned from early on. The very first year before the bill was ever passed, I got invited to Washington to speak before a 1,200 people dinner. It was the National Women's Law Center. They were honoring me and Nancy Pelosi. The men in that audience that night, they said they would never buy another Goodyear tire because they got it. The men are getting it. The men got it in Denver, too. There were more men in the hotel that night after I spoke, and the next day talked about they get it. They understand. In my hometown, which I live in a small college town, we have 10,000 students. There are a lot of older professors who have retired from the university, and they're about 85, and they've written letter after letter to speak out, supporting my case and my bill, and all of them have, and they understand. A lot of them don't even have daughters. They tell me they have granddaughter-in-laws, and they are supporting it because it means a lot to their family. Around this country today, it takes two people in most families to hang on to the middle class and to maintain the lifestyle that most of us like to live. And it's not extravagant, it's just the basics of life. But the men get it. That's why this is so good, and that's why, as I told the audience at dinner, that it not only my case is a prime example of what's going on in this country. I worked for 35 years total in the 3 jobs I held. And at one time, 6 years, I worked 2 jobs full-time for 9 months of the year. And then that's how I got the H&R Block manager's job, because I worked for them part-time 9 months a year and worked another full-time job to try to earn what I expected to be paid. But that's going on today, and it shouldn't be. A person should be compensated for what they are earning. And, equal pay law went on the books in 63 and Title VII in 64. Those bills are almost 50 years old, and to my knowledge, nothing's ever been done to update them. Lisa would probably know better than I, but it's hard to believe that in 2007, in 2008, Lisa and I was wearing out our shoe leather, going up on the Hill, meeting with Congress people and Senate, House and Senate, trying to get support for the Ledbetter bill. And we would have appointments, and it was cold, and we went every day, long hours. The National Women's Law Center paid for me a plane ticket and my lodging. And I ate a lot of peanut butter crackers, and sometimes Lisa would buy me a good meal. So I hadn't lost any weight, but it was, it's really a struggle. And there were a lot of groups that were there. All of the groups have supported this case, and lawyer groups have, and the men get it. But that's a wonderful question, and I thank you for asking it because that's so important for me to share.
Do we have any other questions?
Was there ever a point in all of your journey that you thought of giving up, or you thought that you couldn't go on anymore? Was there ever any point that you just thought it was really hard?
No. As I told you in the beginning, I told my husband, I said, we're going to do it. We're doing it. Now, I will tell you this. Goodyear sent me a bill after the Supreme Court ruling for $3,165 of printing cost. And there was a lot of nights that, me being a night shifter, it takes a long time to get that out of your system. So I'd be up at night. My husband would get up and come into the den, and he would say, Lily, are you sure you know what you're doing? I said, nope. But I said, I've got to do it. And we discussed it. What's the worst that could happen? The only thing we had was a house that was paid for. We could lose our house, but we started at bottom once time before, and we felt like that we could start at bottom again if that's what it took. And I had so much faith, and I'm such a believer, and if it's right, it's right, and it will prevail. I grew up in rural South in the farmland. My grandfather farmed. My parents didn't farm, but I had to learn the ethics of working. So my mother had me to go over to my grandfather's farm. So I've picked cotton and I've chopped cotton. I knew to do a good day's work and for a good day's pay, but I expect to be treated right, and I could never let it go because it was not right. My family supported me, and my closest friends did. But a case like this, you do find out who your real friends are. You find out who your real support is. And it's a shame that some of your friends have to come out and say, I can't do this in public, but I support what you're doing. Good question. But I would never let it go. I started it, and I could not. I just could not. And it was really, it's hard on the individual, it's hard on the family, especially when you get the illness like we did in our family. Or you're planning a vacation, or you're planning a trip. Somebody asks you, can you go a certain place? And you look at the calendar, nope, I'm in court, or I got to go see the lawyer. And most every weekend for the last 2 years prior to my trial, I went through Gadsden and picked up somebody every Sunday and drove them to Birmingham, 75 miles to see the lawyer. We would meet with them, trying to get support to testify. And you're exactly right. People who are still working or retired for Goodyear will not step out because they have a long-reaching arm and they haven't improved their system. I was in Akron a couple of weeks ago. They have a lady there that got elected to the commission. They made her give up. She's an industrial engineer. They made her give up her rights, her benefits, and she only works 4 days a week to be on the commission. But the white male who used to have that same position, they let him off with no, but they said things were different now. It was tougher. She'd have to do that. So they haven't changed their policies, not one bit. But I don't buy Goodyear tires. I don't like them. I don't run them, and I don't buy them. So any other questions? Any answers? I could use an answer, couldn't you, Lisa? Well, we still have a long way to go because I had no idea until I got into this, and the stories I hear them in the airports because people recognize me. And the one story that I'll share with you is a lady who retired from an investment firm, and she said she was a secretary, and then back when the interest rate went sky high, they needed some more people, so they were looking for 2 men, of course. They couldn't find anybody that could do the job, so they decided that she knew it, they'd promote her. So they raised her salary up to $85,000, and she was thrilled. She had a child, raising it alone, and she was thrilled with that increase. But they later hired 2 men. They started each one of them at $125,000. She retired 10 years later, still making $85,000. I said, why didn't you file a charge? Why didn't you say something? She said, if I had, I would have been that $30,000 secretary or out on the street unemployed, one of the two. And $50,000 difference, or $55,000 in my pay for me and my daughter meant the difference in a good education, and I do have a decent retirement, and I can get by. That's another reason that we are so far behind, because so few people can step out and step up and do this. It's not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money either, because you remember in my case, I got $3.8 million. It dropped to $360. The attorneys, had I got that, would have gotten 50%, and I would have had to pay taxes on most of it because it was in lieu of wages. And I had already spent about $35,000 of my own money buying gas and printing costs and what have you through the 7 years of getting the case heard. So that's why we are so far behind. I have people call me today, and they'll run their cases and their experiences by me. What would you do? Well, I don't know, and I'm not a lawyer, but I'll tell them what their options are, because I do know those now. And if they're in Alabama, I can refer them to a good attorney. And if they're not in Alabama, I tell them how to find one where they're at. And first of all, their first step is to go to EEOC and run it by them to see if they've got a charge. And you'll be happy to know, as I was recently in Washington, that the new president has doubled the staff with equal employment across the nation. He's increased their budgets. They can do more. They're going around the country in every state educating the municipalities on how they deal with their employees and what they say and how they deal with them. And even in my town, the maintenance guy that I have, he said he attended one of those sessions in Gadsden. He had no idea that he was breaking the law so many times at work. So those are good things that are happening. We're not waiting in the shadows to have a lawsuit. That's not our goal. That's not anybody's goal to have a lawsuit. That's the last thing you want. And that's why most young women choose to resign a job and move on to a different company that's more friendly to work for. And I'm told that Iowa's the best state for a woman or minority to work, is what I'm told. So I don't know. I haven't moved up here yet, but I've thought about it. But any other questions? Mm-hmm. They did. Yes, I did. They have, when I filed, she's asked that, she remembered me saying that EEOC called and said they thought I had a good case. Here's the way they work. Now you have to call and get an appointment, but me, I just showed up. I showed up that day and registered and waited in line, and then the interviewer got me and interviewed me, and they took it on then and started investigating, and they have a lawyer who investigates. And they have a lawyer who proceeds the case. But in Birmingham at that time, they were so understaffed, they couldn't do it. They only had one attorney at the time for the whole operation. Now they're winning a lot of cases, too, because they would have taken it if it had been today, and they would have handled my case. And but they're going forward with those cases. But what he said was, you've got a good case, and you may not want to wait 5 years to get to court. And he said you really should be there in 2 by getting an attorney or, possible. And also we got criticized in the Supreme Court because the equal pay and the back pay and the discriminatory law cases were together. But the federal judge in Birmingham put those 2 together. My attorney had them separate. So that's why when they ruled in the Supreme Court, I lost the 2 years back pay as well as the other. But the equal employment people, they have attorneys, they pursue the cases, they go in and investigate, and then they will go to court and represent. And most of the time, the people that I read about, they settle. They don't ever get to court.
All right. Well, I know Ms. Ledbetter has another engagement at 9 o'clock this evening. So on behalf of the Carrie Chapman Catt Center, the American Association of University Women, and the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, let's give Lily Ledbetter a hand one more time and thank her.
Thank you. 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 Thank you.